when you have to follow up the movie, which has pretty much completely disregarded all the setups that were in place from the first one, and as JJ calls them, mystery boxes, and has introduced elements which not a lot of people are fans of. What do you do? Do you move forward with what has been done, or do you retcon all the things that people didn't like from the previous movie, which was most of the movie, and shove in as much fan service as you can humanly fit into 2 hours of runtime and hope that it all sticks? Clearly, JJ went with the latter. The movie from the get-go feels like a response to the Last Jedi backlash and all the wild turns that it took. So, Palpatine is back. Why, you ask? Because Ryan Johnson inexplicably killed Snoke, and the movie needs a villain. So, in the first of many contrived twists, it's revealed that Palpatine used some unexplained, unseen power, which they dismiss with a Dark Plagueis reference, to come back to life. And further, it's revealed that he was the voice of Vader and Snoke and had been pulling the strings on everything all along. So somehow, in spite of falling to his death, the Emperor not only came back to life, he set up the First Order, which, if you remember, is a massive organization, created Snoke, quote unquote, and through Snoke pulled Kylo Ren to the dark, put Ben Solo to the dark side. Also, he had they somehow created the Starkiller base, and now he has this fleet of planet killing star destroyers at his disposal, ready to go. And I ask how, just how? All of this comes out of absolutely nowhere and is a clear attempt at course correction. And now, when your attempt at course correction is a major twist that comes out of nowhere and raises more questions than it answers, yeah, that's not good. It's the first retcon made by this movie, and to fix TLJ's mistakes, and it's a major contrivance that reflects how poorly this trilogy was planned. Rey is being trained by Leia. Rey requiring training. That's interesting, right? And she struggles more against this tiny training droid than she has in any fight up until this point. And I praise the effort, but too little, too late. And she doesn't struggle in a fight really after this that much, so it's pointless. But we get Leia training Rey, and it's like the way they used Carrie Fisher's deleted footage from The Force Awakens and repurposed it. I think that's admirable the way they did that, and like it's interesting. And she and Kylo are still doing their Force Skype calls, and the movie definitely is continuing the romantic thread, I guess, from The Last Jedi, and it's definitely continuing the romantic tension between them from The Last Jedi, and yeah, it's definitely picks up that thread from The Last Jedi and continues on that. So at least some part of the fan base is happy. So a spy in the First Order gives them information about JJ's favorite narrative device, MacGuffins, and it's called the Wayfinder, which will guide them to the Sith planet. But there's also some nonsense with the dagger, and there's some really cringe-worthy action set pieces along the way, like the "they fly now" scene, which is just so hilarious. Just it's not even it's so bad and so dumb and so cringeworthy, and they definitely should not have put this in one of the trailers. That was a ridiculous decision. Whoever did that, like, why is that an attempt to be funny? Because it was just so cringeworthy. And uh now Ray has the power to heal people, heal animals and people using the Force, because why not? And Chewbacca gets taken prisoner on a ship, and Ray zaps the ship with Sith lightning, and it's some pretty obvious foreshadowing for what comes later. And then Ray is sort of guilt stricken, but then it turns out that he is alive, so it was all just a pointless beat to elicit a reaction because it's a character that people actually care about. Anyways, we get another major retcon slash apology for TLG, another one of TLG's controversial decisions. This one is about Ray's parents or lineage, and it turns out that she is the granddaughter of Palpatine. And when Kylo is revealing this, the phrasing of the line sits in such a way, it's hilarious. The way he says it's basically like your parents were nobody, but your grandfather was someone extremely important. So you're not nobody, I guess. So the major problem I have with this reveal is that this should have happened in the middle of Rey's arc, not at the end where she has very little time to contemplate what it means for her identity. And in TLJ, we get the message that she is a nobody. She has to find a place, find her place herself. Message. Now JJ is like, nah, she's a Palpatine. And that while this does answer questions about Rey's abilities with the Force, uh, and she goes on to have a semi-interesting but rather rust struggle with the dark side. I personally thought that Raise a Nobody was a more interesting and original place to take her story in. And since it had happened in the middle of her arc, they could have fleshed it out in this movie and explored it more thoroughly. And but then JJ wouldn't have gotten to rip off Empire's evil Sith Lord is actually related to you moment. So yeah, in either case, whether she is related to someone special or not, I think proper training should have played a part in her development as a force user in either case. So yeah, just saying. And then Kylo and Rey fight on the Death Star wreckage from the Battle of Endor, which is weird because it was blown to smithereens, but it makes for a cool location to fight, I guess. Speaking on the fighting in general, I think the action, the lightsaber battles between them, I found the force Skype call fight scenes more interesting because the dynamic kept shifting with between the scenes, and I thought the action in general, like the lightsaber battles between them, were definitely interesting. But yeah, going back a little bit, the lightsaber battles when they're not in the same place, that was more interesting and definitely a lot cooler. But this fight is well choreographed, and it's pretty good. And then Kylo and Leia connect using the Force, and it was a well done sequence that concluded Leia's story as effectively as they could have done, I guess, given Carrie Fisher's passing. Then Ray heals Ben and says she wanted to take Ben's hand, sort of starting his like emergence as Ben Solo and leaving behind of the Kylo Ren identity. And then Kylo gets a visit from a memory of Han Solo, and this is like it's a nice scene. The performances by Adam Driver and Harrison Ford are pretty damn good, and it's the final push for him to turn to the light once and for all. It was a decent conclusion to his dark side journey, and I guess a decent beginning to his redemption. But my problem is that we don't get any closure on the Luke tried to murder his nephew in his sleep thing, and I was expecting Luke's Force Ghost to talk to Kylo, but instead, Rey meets with Luke's Force Ghost on Arc 2, and the movie gets meta and totally shits on Last Jedi Luke, like the infamous throwing the lightsaber moment, and the fact that Luke abandoned his friends and stayed on Arc 2 like a coward. They don't do much with Luke. They have him spout some exposition, and through it they try to sneak in another retcon about Leia's Force abilities, where it's explained that she had been trained by Luke long ago. But that still doesn't improve the awkward TLJ Mary Poppins moment. So yeah, but Kylo Ren gets the blue lightsaber from this whole thing, and because there's another lightsaber, and because of this, I guess he's in the end he's sort of able to connect with his mother symbolically or reaffirm himself as a Solo slash Skywalker. It's okay, and then moving on, let's talk a little bit about Finn's character for a moment, because honestly I think his character has been seriously wasted by not just this movie but the whole trilogy. He started out really interesting as a rogue stormtrooper, but then, like all things in this entire trilogy, things sort of start interestingly and then go nowhere. So he's been comedic relief for for the most part all throughout. And in the Last Jedi, he goes on a completely pointless, horrible subplot that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, and it's just it's bad. And and then Rose, and then thankfully whatever he had with Rose in that movie is disregarded and completely just discarded by JJ in this movie. So yeah, and then uh and then in this movie he just goes from one set piece to another, pining after Ray and doing virtually nothing interesting or revealing or memorable. And then there's this new character Jana, and she's also an ex stormtrooper, but again nothing particularly interesting happens. They talk about it in one scene, and yeah, that's it. And there's all throughout, like in the Force Awakens and in this movie, we get hints that he's force sensitive, but like they don't ever really explore that angle fully, just like his stormtrooper past. Like none of it, his character seriously feels just like completely, like, it's like a summary of an interesting character, but like we haven't really seen him do anything that interesting, or like his past hasn't really like haunted him, or like it's not really played into any of the choices that he makes. And yeah, he's a total waste of some really interesting ideas. And then Poe Dameron, he also has had a very weird development in this trilogy. He was barely in The Force Awakens, and his arc in The Last Jedi, going from reckless and arrogant to humble, was very poorly done because Holdo, his narrative foil in that movie, is the worst, most pathetically written character in all of Star Wars, if not in all of fiction in general. And in this movie, we learn that he used to be a spice runner with this masked character called Zori Bliss, about who we get to learn absolutely like very little about. And like his backstory, we get very little of his backstory, and it's kind of unnecessary since it doesn't really affect his arc in this movie, which is about stepping up to Leia's position and then leading the resistance. I mean, that whole Zori Bliss angle is convenient from like a plot angle, but it doesn't really particularly affect his character arc, like about like where he's come from in general. Like wherever characters come from, it's just not, that angle is never really explored. It's mostly about where they are now. And yeah, and like that never really plays into any of the characters' any of the journeys or any of the arcs of the characters. And especially Poe, since we know very little about him anyway. And and like he steps up to Leia's position in the resistance. And this could have had a lot more, like much more weight, had we seen the development of Leia and Poe's relationship in the previous two movies. Yes, they had some interesting scenes in The Last Jedi and in The Force Awakens, but that was very little and few and far between. And I think if they had developed that angle, that them as a mentor, as her as mentor, uh, and for him, I think it could have been much more powerful than the movie would like you to believe. But it's not that powerful, and so it's a decent, very passable, very serviceable character arc. So now let's talk about the ending. So Palpatine's ultimate plan is for Rey to get to Exegol while he deploys this fleet of planet-destroying star destroyers, and his plan is for her to kill him, give in to her hate and rage, and take his place as Empress Palpatine. And once again, J.J. Abrams copies and pastes what has already been done. This time, the ending of Return of the Jedi, and he's doing absolutely nothing new here. Can nothing new ever happen with these characters? You'd think that Palpatine would have something new up his sleeve after this exact same plan did not work the last time, but he lacks any sense of imagination, or more accurately, the writers lack imagination. Anyway, they and hope that they fill by filling the screens with nostalgia and fan service will make up for it, but it doesn't, obviously. So the final confrontation is between Ben, Ray, and Palpatine, who joins the fight. Ben joins the fight, and yeah, that was a cool moment. Him coming back there and looking like almost like it's Anakin in a way, and sort of affirming himself, his place as Skywalker, I guess. But like, so they don't really fight. Like the Emperor just absorbs their energy for a while because they're dyads in the Force, so they're naturally very powerful together. And then he just chucks Ben off a cliff and laughs maniacally. Now, Ian McDiarmid, he definitely still has the same exact captivating presence that he has always had, but I really wish he had been given something more interesting to do and not just repeat what he has already done and failed at. Anyways, the whole Palpatine representing all the Sith and Rey representing all the Jedi, it was super corny and cheesy and like a really, really try hard ish attempt at. They were so desperate to make something epic or at least appear epic, but I was just sitting there wondering what else are they going to try now. And then Rey just deflects Palpatine's Sith lightning back on him. He's disintegrated, and that's how he goes out. Rey requiring no help because, of course, she doesn't require any help. She doesn't require any help to actually take Palpatine down. I wonder why Ben was even there because since he's the last Skywalker alive, I assumed he'd have more to do with how Palpatine is actually defeated. Since it's the guy who has been tormenting his family for so long, but no, Ben serves the purpose of reviving Rey, and after getting a kiss from Rey, so yeah, and then he dies after getting a kiss from Rey. So yeah, their dynamic romantic angle, which is very cliched, good, good girl likes brooding guy trope that we've seen play out a lot of times, is that's what happens, and yeah, the shippers can rejoice. I thought it was I didn't really think that we needed them to like firmly sort of like give in to like this, give in to that angle. I felt like they could have done something more interesting, but no, they went with this. Like, okay. So, anyways, the final sequence is just packed to the brim with callbacks and everybody unites, but I didn't feel a thing because I have zero investment in the new characters and in any of their arcs. I have no particular investment in any of the characters that we've met in these new installments, and I think they really their arcs have been really messy and inconsistent or just plain mediocre. And as Ray looked at the binary sunset, I felt nothing because it was meaningless crap. And I was expecting to feel something major given that it's the end of the Skywalker saga. But I was just sitting there numb from the 2 hour long empty spectacle with little to no heart or spirit in it.